Well, hello and welcome everybody. This is the newest installment of our Make Work Happen podcast. Raj and I have been doing these, and we're just super enthused to tap into our community and our customer base and luminaries. And I'll introduce my friend here in a second. The whole concept of the Make Work Happen podcast. And the goal is just to give you, our IT leaders who are out there listening and consuming this content with real insights. You'll find very quickly that Raj and I, in particular, and our team, the whole juice, I think, of what JumpCloud is built on is building connections and building those critical connections with you, our end users, and our community members is obviously most critical. And this whole podcast is emblematic of that. So, to that point, we bring on people that obviously, give us a ton of inspiration. And today I'm thrilled, and I am not embellishing when I say to bring in my friend, Brad Feld, partner at Foundry Group, one of the founding members of Foundry Group. Brad, I'll let you do your own intro here in a second. But this is very meaningful for me because you have been a huge inspiration of mine since I moved to Boulder over 20, almost 25 years ago, well before Foundry was established. And I'm just so happy I can spend some time with you and have you share your amazing insights with our listener base. So Brad, welcome.
I am delighted to be here. And every time I see you, I think of what an excellent roommate you are.
Oh my goodness. We shouldn't tell people all of our sordid secrets. That's true. Yeah. For those who don't know, Brad and I, we were bedfellows. So in some Eastern Bloc country, set in the mountains.
Ill-fated bike trip. It sounds like a bad Robert Ludlum novel.
Totally. That was an amazing trip. But I'm glad that we could get this together and given our schedules, a few things I would love for people to understand Brad Feld, just a brief history of time, and what you're up to now. And you'll see, we're going to talk about, I think the root of this podcast, really what we want people to hear about, which is the give first mentality. Something that many people outside of Boulder don't understand, like what we thrive in here for now a few decades, and you've been an inspiration to that. But first, let's learn about Brad Feld. That would be wonderful for our folks to hear about your history.
Sure. I am wandering into the third of life. I turn 60 soon, and I'm embracing that construct.
Oh.
I started my first company 40 years ago, which seems like a long time now when I say it out loud. I built a business based in Boston with a partner. We sold it to a public company in 1993. I took almost all the money that I made selling that company and invested in about 40 startups between 94 and 96. Today, that's not that big a deal. 1994, like doing an investment a month was kind of ludicrous. Nobody did stuff like that. My very, very first angel investment was in Raj Bhargava's first company, NetGenesis. I knew absolutely nothing about investing in companies. I'd been a CEO for a while, but I really, with Raj over many, many years, have done a bunch of companies and have learned a lot about what works and what doesn't and how to build a successful business. With my wife, Amy Batchelor, we moved to Boulder in 1995 randomly. Amy told me she was moving to Boulder and I'd come with her. We didn't know anybody in Boulder. So it was really choosing a place to live. And I've had an amazing 30 years in Boulder, investing in companies, helping start a few companies, co-founding something called Techstars, which was just an experiment when we started it. That's now turned into a company that's funded over 4,000 companies around the world.
Alumni.
And you're an alum. I co-founded a venture fund, Foundry Group, in 2007 that today has about 80 active portfolio companies, including JumpCloud. We've also invested in about 50 venture funds. And I've written a bunch of books. This book that we'll talk about, Give First, is my 9th book. And when I sort of think about myself today versus 40 years ago, or 30, or even 20 or 15 years ago, I'm sort of at the end of a curve that for many people never ends. I know lots of people who die while they're on the curve. I also know lots of people who can't seem to shift their role in the curve. And I've been doing it systematically over some period of time, which is I haven't run anything for a very long time. And for me, I get great satisfaction out of helping others be successful, whether that's a founder of a company, a CEO of a company, a leader of initiative. And while I've had a lot of involvement, public facing, and provided a lot of leadership in lots of different things over time, including, of course, in the Boulder startup community and all the activity around that, but then also these different organizations, I've really shifted my energy into trying to be as impactful as I can by helping others lead, build, drive, succeed. And you hear it as a cliche and a truism a lot in terms of things like venture capital. Oh, my job is to help, CEOs be successful. And yet, the behavioral norms that you see from so many people, especially as they become more successful or in positions of more power or have more wealth, is to actually do things that compound and build on that power and wealth, rather than shift how they approach what they're doing. It's not a judgment, different ways of living life. But for me, when I think about it, I don't know whether I have a day left on this planet or 30 years left on this planet. It really probably depends on how the AIs feel about me. And dear AIs, I'm your friend. I'm one of the nice ones. I love you.
I love you, robot overlords.
Please don't exterminate me. I've had lots of ups and downs as a founder and as an investor. I've had lots of things be very successful. I've had plenty of things be complete failures. I've snatched victory from the jaws of defeat, and I've snapped defeat from the jaws of victory, right? Like the whole spectrum. And at this stage, like, I'm pretty happy with, like, looking backwards on the dynamics around accomplishment and striving and that sort of thing, and been fortunate in a lot of respects. And so I look at it very much from the standpoint of how can I spend my time from here until I expire, not in the service of others, but in a role where I'm helping others accomplish what they're trying to get done.
Super interesting. I remember vividly, moved to Boulder, almost 25 years ago, maybe like 23 years ago, and from the Bay Area. So let me forward-looking statement. I am not going to disparage the Bay Area. My family and friends are still there, but I will say this. When I moved here, it was such a contrast from what I had experienced. Like, frankly, living in San Francisco in the 90s and 2000s when everything was going off was a marvel. Like, it was such an exhilarating rush to be at that time in a startup that went public and the whole thing. But what I witnessed were highly, enclosed, ensconced people who would not share. And because it was highly, secrets were highly sought after. So you would never, tell people, advice or, at least anything meaningful or substantive. So we moved here, and within the first week, I'm in coffee shops and there's active dialogue of, how to do better, right? There were people giving. And, I think at the time, Boulder has changed, like many things have changed. It was like sort of the business representation of the Boulder hippieism that I loved, and frankly, why we wanted to raise our kids, who were babies at the time in San Francisco, now are out of the house. But it taught me as a business professional, there is another way. Like, I'm witnessing another way, and then actively participating in those conversations. teaching what I had learned. And I know it's not going to come back to hit me in the head or kill me. And it was a rush, and it felt great.
I think the thing you point to, which is really fun to play with, is that every geography has some cultural norms. And one of the deeply held beliefs I have is that you shouldn't go someplace for a job, that you should, if you have the resources and the ability, you should choose where you want to live and build your life around it, which is essentially what you did when you moved your family to Boulder. Essentially what Amy and I did when we moved to Boulder. And, what's the downside case? We don't like it. We'll try something different.
Yeah.
And the interesting then part about the cultural norms, not dissimilar from a company, you get to, as a founder of a company, you get to define the cultural norms of the business. And I like to say cultural norms rather than culture, because I think culture is a very weak word. It allows you to sort of hand wave over everything versus like define what are the norms. And I'm also a big believer in this idea of culture add rather than culture fit. For a long time when I was younger, people would talk about how important culture fit was in the definition and the growth of the business. And, I kind of struggled with that phrase for a long time. And what I realized over time was that it wasn't culture fit. It was subscription to the cultural norms. You want these norms to be defined and that the people that join your company subscribe to the norms, but each person that comes to the company adds something to it. So the language mattered. Like if you say, well, we're just looking for people with culture fit, as the business gets bigger and bigger and bigger, you get a monoculture that starts to fold in on itself.
Yeah.
But if you say, no, here are cultural norms. This is our value system. You can talk about it however you want. Values, cultural norms, are different labels for it. But like this formalism of these are the things we believe. These are the things we subscribe to. They can change. They can be extended. They can be evolved. But this is the norms. And as a founder or a leader of a company, that's part of your job, is to build those norms. But then you're looking for people that add to the norms. In a city or geography, especially around something like startup community, the same thing happens. Except I would say the signal to noise ratio gets out of whack pretty fast. Every city, every geography tries to create its own marketing lens for people to see what it's like. This is what my geography is like. I live in this city. I heard somebody say something recently describing, they were both from New York and from LA. Actually, it's two founders. One was from New York and one was from LA. The company was in both places. They moved back and forth, and they both lived in the other place. They've been best friends since little kids, the co-founders. And we're just sitting around saying, I know both places pretty well. And they said, yeah, how do y'all describe them? And one of the women quickly, immediately, boom, like without waiting, she said, New York is awesome hell. LA is lame heaven.
Oh, that is unbelievable.
Right? I'm like, I thought about it for a second. Like, actually, that's kind of my experience. Like, I think New York City is hell. I'm not a big city person. It's really hard for me to like navigate around for more than a couple of days.
Yep.
If you like that, it's awesome.
It's awesome.
Right?
Yeah.
And LA is kind of like heaven.
Yeah.
But it's pretty lame. I give those examples because I think they're such fun examples. So, your Boulder is a hippie culture. My description of Boulder is basically a collision of hippies and nerds.
Yeah.
You had a bunch of hippies in the 1960s that were driving from the East Coast to the West Coast because all the hippies were in the West Coast. That was the center of hippiedom, San Francisco, right? Haight-Ashbury, and I want to be in California. And they ran out of gas in the mountains. And they're like, well, they got stoned. And they're like, yeah, these mountains are pretty cool. We'll just stay here.
Yep.
That's like one part of Boulder. And in fact, a lot of those were the founders of some of the iconic Boulder companies like Celestial Seasoning, Silk, these food companies that became the natural food industry was started in Boulder. And then you have this other thing, which is all these people that showed up in Boulder in the 1950s and 1960s when Eisenhower started the national labs in Colorado and Boulder. And between NOAA and NREL and NCAR, like all of a sudden you had this concentration of incredibly smart people in a university town, CU Boulder. And now we're 3 or 4 generations into that. of those cultural norms, of the hippie culture, combined with a very, very smart intellectual culture where the value system of both actually was to be smart, to learn, to explore, to be creative, to try different things. And that's the collision. So, does the Bay Area have elements of that? Of course. But if you painted the Bay Area with the brush of that's what the Bay Area is, and that's what the startup community in the Bay Area is, or that's what Silicon Valley is, well, actually, it's not anymore.
Right.
And it's not anymore because a lot of different things and a lot of different flavors and a lot of different things have happened over time. And, is that good or bad? No, it's just different. And in the same way that LA is different, that Seattle is different, that Austin is different. And in the context of Boulder and my own experience over 30 years in building and being involved in building the startup community there, this philosophy that you referenced, that's the title of my book, Give First, which is a philosophy I've been espousing for a long time, even though I didn't have words for it. It's important to recognize it's a philosophy. It's not a religion. And I think that's one of the things that people get confused about when they think about norms, right? If you think about the norms we can go back to the Bay Area. We don't have to be mean to it, but you think about the norms, a lot of the norms have become religion. To be successful, you must do these things.
Right.
Versus, here are some ideas to incorporate into what you're doing. And by the way, there's a very, very good book that really shows the power of some of these things, these norms in the Bay Area, that was written in the mid-90s by a great person, a professor, Annalise Saxenian. Mm-hmm. And it was an inspiring book for me. It basically compares Route 128 to the Bay Area and talked about what happened where the Route 128 was actually the center of technology before the Silicon Valley became Silicon Valley.
For the non-educated, Route 128, the Boston Loop.
The loop around Boston. And so sort of the evolution, the difference between norms and what caused in different areas, the Bay Area and Silicon Valley specifically, to really accelerate around pre-internet personal computing and then the internet, whereas Route 128 had dominated the mini computer era, both hardware and software.
Right.
And so you get these different things that are not, again, the norms that evolve over time. If you tie it back to Give First and to Boulder, one of the things that was very apparent from when I first got there in the mid-90s was this understanding of people that they were playing a non-transactional, positive sum, multi-turn game. And I'll stay with those three words. Like, you wouldn't walk down the street and say, "Hey, what's the cultural norm here?" And somebody would say it's positive sum, non-transactional, multi-turn. People would say that shit. Right? But when you look at it with the benefit of time, you had a lot of people who were willing to engage with you without defining what was going to happen. They're just interested. They're interesting people. They want to talk. They want to hang out. They want to get involved in what you're doing. What you're doing is interesting. They're happy to help. Remember, I moved to Boulder in 95. I knew no one. And within a year, I found a whole bunch of people that were my people because they were other founders and they were all helping each other do stuff and get connected. And it wasn't a scarcity mindset of, I got to keep this to myself. It was a generosity mindset, or as an abundance mindset that was just, again, the hippie culture played into that. It's like, let's just be happy. Like, I don't have to win and you lose, which comes to positive sum. We might win in different levels, but we can both win. We can both benefit from the interaction. Yeah, of course, there's competitive dynamics. Yeah, of course, people get sideways with each other. That's human beings. That's our species. But the cultural norm is one where we're trying to help each other. By the way, it's a pretty strong cultural norm in the Western United States, not just isolated to Colorado. But if you think about the sort of evolution of the Western U.S. and you look at regions like Arizona and Utah, New Mexico, maybe even Nevada, like there is this culture of, we're all in this together. Let's help each other out. Like leave my shit alone. Like my shit's my shit, but let's help each other.
Yeah, I think so. I think
I also grew up in Texas, and Texas, interestingly, was very much that. It was like, my shit's my shit. Leave me alone. Let me do my stuff. But, you got a problem, my neighbor, let me help you. So as you roll through these things, to this notion, the last comment here of multi-turn, like so many of these things are things that play out over a long period of time. And I think this is a norm that is really well understood by many in the Bay Area, by many in any of the major startup communities around the world, whether it's Boston or New York. And in this moment, the edge of it is a little confusing. And I'll describe what that is. There's a phrase, co-opetition,
of course,
that became popular in the late 80s, early 90s. It was kind of the Novell was the company, I think, that maybe Ray Norda created that shtick. Yep. And then it sort of became this idea of we compete with you, but we want to partner with you. So lots of companies that otherwise competed started making standards for interoperability around networking and PC. And then, of course, the internet was an ultimate of the interoperability. And companies would do that. And yet there was still these challenges like Microsoft on one end, which would either build something that emulated what you did and try to stomp you out after partnering with you, or would acquire a company and try to ingest that into what it did. And so the partnering dynamic there was quite complicated in comparison to, for example, a lot of the partnering activity that emerged with the internet, especially in the Bay Area, that was interoperability between products. Multi-turn versus single-turn game. Multi-turn game of I'm going to be working with you at the next company you're at. I'm going to be working with you, and our companies are going to be trying to collaborate together to be successful versus, the Borg and Redmond that's trying to either absorb everything. And if you, again, play around with that idea and you think about a norm that's very powerful, this idea of, we've known each other 25 years. We've been involved in a couple of things that worked and a couple of things that didn't work. And the first thing that didn't work, I could say, I'm done with that guy, or you could say, I'm done with Brad. And instead it's like, we learned a lot from that. It wasn't any fun, but we learned from it. And let's incorporate that into what we're doing next. That's a deep value system. So I realize riffing on a bunch of things and mixing them up together, but I think that's the essence that you reflect when you talk about this different feeling that you had from Boulder and frankly, where it came from.
Yeah. There's also like a necessity to that, especially here in some of these other, call them burgeoning cities where there's activity. Historically, and this better than most, like the coast dominated, they were the dense centers of capital. And our little section of the country just was, the bastard stepchild, right? There wasn't enough money to go and build these audacious ideas. And I think the co-opetition aspect and the collaborative aspect was required. Not just, we were surviving, there's plenty, there's capital here. But, for us to thrive, like truly thrive in the grandest sense of the word, where, now only in the last, 15 years or so, and I'll speak purely for the sort of tech sector, you're seeing companies go from nothing to publicly traded companies and created these monster successes. It wasn't always that way. But to that end, I want to give folks, we have an audience of people that are, in technology dominated. I would say the audience members are IT related. Let's riff on some things that I know that they'd want to see. But first, if I could, tell people why they should pick up this book, Give First, and we'll make sure that the URL and everything, so you can get a snapshot of it in advance. I want to get a sense of how you constructed this book to help. It's the meta sense of like what you experienced and did. How did you instantiate that in words, and what do you want these people to walk away with?
Yeah, thanks for prompting with it, and I'll use the last 20 minutes as a simple answer. If the last 20 minutes were intriguing, interesting, touched a chord in some way, not all of it, but some element of it, then you'll like the book. If you just listen to the last 20 minutes and you stop the podcast and you're not listening now anymore, or you listen to that and you're like, it's not bullshit. I don't know what this stuff is. What this guy talking about? You're not going to like the book. So the dynamic of the book, I've essentially do two things. I talk about this philosophy of give first. I'll define it just really quickly. Give first is being willing to put energy into a system without knowing what you're going to get back. It's not altruism. You expect to get something back. You just don't know when, from whom, over what time period, and what consideration. Again, philosophy, not religion. It's not a set of rules to live your life by. It's an idea, a philosophy to incorporate into the way that you are. And I combine that with what I've learned about how to be effective as a mentor. And I've learned that from a bunch of different experiences, probably the most powerful being the experience I've had at Techstars over the last 20 years since we started it. And the idea of what is effective mentorship versus not effective or ineffective mentorship. That comes from a thing that David Cohen, who is co-founder of Techstars, wrote in 2010 called the Techstars Mentor Manifesto, which is 18 bullet points. Again, not rules, just ideas. And they're ideas for you to make your own. But they were observations and ideas that came from experiences we were having mentoring early stage startups, working with them, observing other mentors, mentoring founders, and linking these two ideas, because there's a magic trick in the end. And, if the audience here are people in at different levels of IT organizations, as you're working your way up in the organization that you're part of, as you're getting more experience, one of the things that I personally have found incredibly satisfying is both getting help from people more experienced than me, as well as helping people less experienced than me. And the magic trick, which is the inverse of that, which is helping people who are more experienced than me and learning from people who are less experienced than me. The real magic trick in all of this is for the mentor-mentee relationship to become a peer relationship. So, Greg, when I think about my relationship with you, I've learned as much from you as you've learned from me. You may say, I remember a day where we bumped into each other in SFO and we had met once or twice before. I can't remember why you were there and coming back from what to where to what and what that resulted in. But I remember standing there and talking, and you said something about Embarcadero and there was something else going on at the moment.
Yeah.
And this long arc of the different moments where I know we've been in a room together and you've said, that was a useful insight from me. And I've had the same in a room where I'm like, that's a useful insight from Greg. And so the hierarchy that exists in so many relationships in work and in life, in a mentor-mentee relationship can disappear. And you really shift from this hierarchical model of which anybody working in a large organization is used to, right? You have a boss and your boss has a boss and your boss's boss has a boss. And I like to say there's two ways to move up a hierarchy in an organization. One is to do everything really, really well and be recognized for that and get promoted. And the other is to undermine your boss and get your boss fired and get moved up the ladder. Look, kind of two ways.
Yeah.
I like way one better than way two, but everybody listening, I'm sure, has met somebody that does way two, and that's the way they function. But if you shift out of this mental model of the only thing that matters is the hierarchy inside the company you're in, and you think about the network you have as an individual that now cuts across organizations, that, by the way, if you're listening, my guess is if you send Greg an email, he's going to respond and say, I listened to your podcast. He's going to respond. He's going to be a part of your network all of a sudden. By the way, my email is brad@feld.com. If you send me an email and say, I listened to the podcast with you and Greg, and I thought this was really interesting, and I thought this was really stupid, and here's why I disagree with this, and I'm going to be very interested in that because that's how I learn.
Yep.
And so this moment in time that we're on the other side of now, this happened. The internet enabled it. Social networking taught us what positive and negative characteristics of it. COVID reinforced it with the ability to distribute work. Within technology, APIs started it, where companies and products really started interacting in a lightweight way versus SDKs, which were heavyweight. You had to install them and build them and learn a bunch of shit, whereas APIs, you just had to talk to the other API in the right way. To all of a sudden, we're on the other side of that. And we're now talking about, MCPs that we're literally interacting, between major systems that previously, you could do a bunch of stuff to wire APIs together, but you don't have to do that. Now you have to send very simple messages back and forth in, mostly English. And as long as the technical pieces are connected correctly, really quite amazing stuff can start to happen. So this evolution of technology that we're living in mirrors this network model of how we learn and grow and develop. And so if I put a wrapper around that, in this book, I'm trying to change the language of how a lot of people interact with each other in business, from transactional to non-transactional. And by the way, in 2025, we see an enormous amount of leadership being evidenced again as transactional. Just look at the U.S. government. Non-political statement, but the U.S. government behavior is extraordinarily transactional all of a sudden.
Yeah.
There's some positive attributes of it. And I'm not saying that everything one should do is non-transactional. I mean, the cliche for me is people say, oh, you're that VC that's the non-transactional VC. How about you give me $5 million and when I'm done, I'll send you something if I think you should get something. Like, that's not how it works. There's still transactions in my life, but approaching systems and approaching relationships non-transactionally to see where they go. Approaching them in a positive some way, not I win, you lose, but where we both benefit from our interaction in the system that we're both participants in. And then multi-turn. I mean, I've been working with Raj now since 30 years ago, something like that.
That's right.
It's crazy. And, is Raj, okay, well, you've got, you listed one, Brad, that you worked with for that long. List another. Well, how about Will Herman, who's on the Jump Club board, who also was the very first angel investor. His very first angel investment was alongside me with Raj and somebody I knew longer than that. I could keep going. Like those relationships that are interwoven in a substantial way, sure, we all have that. But how much surface area can you cover if you start to take a different philosophical approach, or if you start to include a give first philosophical approach in the surface area of what you can cover? I'd assert it's much broader than the one than if everything's transactional.
I want to. All right, we're going to continue down this scene because this is a good one. Let me reinforce this. Our audience listening right now are vastly, IT folks. Brad, you and I have been in and around IT, building things for that community for decades. We both know, and I think we can, assert, it is a thankless job. The whole weight of the world weighs on the shoulders of these IT folks that are supporting the mission of the companies they work for. If they're not doing their jobs, workers aren't working. Business stalls. I mean, it's that serialized. And yet, again, the thankless part is, there's no high fives, very rarely. When you take that and the pressure of that and that what these IT folks have to go through, and now, by the way, they're ensconced not only in their traditional route of, building and establishing the IT portfolio for the company, but they're also getting pulled into all matters of security. Security and IT are definitely on a convergence path rapidly. So that's the context. What practical things, if an IT director were on the call right now or listening live, and they said, give me some practical advice. How should I give first?
Yeah.
It's a thankless environment.
Yeah.
What can I be doing to build those transactional connections?
Well, let me time travel back to my own experiences and then time travel forward to that specific question. So in the late 80s and 90s, when I had my first company, we wrote software for small, medium-sized businesses This was before client-server computing, before the internet. It was when database technology didn't really work very well on PCs. Networks didn't really work well on PCs. And my company's motto we came up with one day was "We suck less." And the reason we came up with that motto was a lot of times we had a reputation in Boston that all of our business was pull. People would just call us up randomly. We didn't have any marketing. We didn't have any salespeople. We didn't sell anything. They just reach out to us. And again, it was phone. We didn't have email. And They get to us somehow. And they'd say, can you come in? And we're having trouble with this, that, or the other thing. And we come in. And, inevitably they'd say, we've been working on this for 2 years and it doesn't work. And we spent all of our budget and it doesn't work. And can you fix it? And a lot of times it was software, but it also could include the network and the infrastructure that they had. And, this was before Wi-Fi, so the cabling was fragile. And so, it could be all kinds of different problems that they were having that didn't just be it could be a network card that was flaky, that was causing all kinds of network errors, that was constantly corrupting the database, that was then causing the stuff to not work. And we have to level set the frame of reference by saying, look, the fact that you spent 2 years with somebody else and it didn't work and you spent all your money is not our problem. Like, we have empathy for you. Our goal, the people that worked for you before us sucked. Our job is to suck less. And, we'd get a laugh and it would sort of reset the conversation, say, look, this stuff doesn't work very well. It's pretty hard.
Yeah.
And I get your pain. I feel your pain, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm not ever going to complain about the pain you're having. But the contract on the other side of that is you have to recognize that we're coming into a situation that's already messed up.
Yep.
And our job is to unmess it. Now, we were the first one in sometimes. And in those situations, we still had to suck less, but we were comparing ourselves to ourselves. So that
high watermark.
Well, I just want to go back in time for that and say, the number of times where the thing that happened that created abject terror at 2:00 in the morning. I lived in downtown Boston. I used to have a shtick where if I had a client that would call me in the middle of the night, and they all had our home phone numbers, but call me in the middle of the night and say, I'm in my office, I'm trying to print and I can't print. My network's not working. I had a law firm client that did that a few times. They had a very large law firm and we'd written some software for them and we helped them get their networks working properly and their billing system working properly. I just go over in my bathrobe. Right. And everybody would laugh a little, but it would sort of take the tension out of the dynamic. Yeah. Now, let me tie this to maybe one last comment. If anybody's old and remembers Synopsys.
Yeah.
Synopsys racks needed a thing that was called the heartbeat. I can't remember what the actual number of the thing was, but you had all these things that you plugged in the cables to, for your Ethernet network, but then you still needed this one panel. And we had another firm that was installing a giant new network in a new space over the weekend and over a 4th of July weekend. And everything showed up and was ready, except somebody had forgotten to order that one thing. Right? How do you get one of those on July 4th weekend? The answer is you can.
Yeah.
And it involves an airplane. It involves knowing somebody that, is high up at Synopsys that you can call that is going to eventually get somebody to get out of their 4th of July party and put something on an airplane and send it to Colorado or send it to Boston, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And in that moment, you wish you'd bought shit from Wellfleet because Wellfleet was based in Boston, I think, and we could have walked onto their warehouse. Like, the pain is endless, and it's different pain now because of the way that all this stuff works and how it's connected and what the interdependencies are in the cloud. The interesting word there is the interdependencies. If you're involved in any of these interdependencies, it's likely that other people are having pain with your interdependency.
Right.
And so the trick is, I think, in the context of what I'm describing, is whatever the business relationships are between organizations, approach each problem from the standpoint of, my job is to suck less than the other people. when you have pain, I want to relieve your pain, even though it causes me pain. And if I'm causing you pain in terms of the interdependency between systems, my job is to eliminate your pain and I'm going to be the pain absorber in the mix. Now, a lot of IT people, I think, function that way today.
Agree.
But a lot of people don't. A lot of people still, the cliche of, the very happy person that actually never solves a problem. Or another cliche of the person who always is put upon to deal with the problem that the end user is like, why doesn't this just work?
Right.
Or the 2 degrees away from you pain that's now rolling downhill to you, and the person that's inflicting it on you because they're getting beat by somebody that has real anxiety about what's going on. And what I always tried to do in my role, and I think it aligns, was to kind of be mellow about it and to focus on how to eliminate the problem, how to get rid of the pain. What I found in that first company, but I found subsequent, and I continue to be the IT guy in lots of areas of my life, just because once you have capacity, or a capability, you're
the guy.
You're still the guy. Even when Amy is yelling at me about the Savant system is not working correctly on our TV, I don't yell at our IT people that put in the Savant system. I just very quietly go over and unplug it, plug it back in, and mess with it until it starts working again, and then happily give it back to her.
Yeah.
Right. So, I think that's the IT version of it. Because what happens in my own experience is that the person on the other side that's been inflicting pain on you, or that's feeling pain that you're relieving, stops feeling that way towards you when you proactively behave that way towards them. It's not, wait, I'm busy, I'll get to you. It's, you know what, I'll solve this problem. I'm not going to say to you, I'll solve this problem, but will you please stop yelling at me? I'm just going to solve the problem.
Right.
And you do that enough times, and not everyone, but most people stop yelling at you. You solve enough of those crises of interdependency where the problem is not generated by anything you or your organization's done. It's totally AWS just did something and that region is down, and somebody pushed a thing that blew up a thing that's causing, all the lights to light up everywhere, including all the customers not being able to get access to their stuff. It's easy to say, oh, that's AWS's fault. It's another thing to say, okay, here's how we solve the problem. And by the way, here's the root cause of the problem, so that the next time it happens, because it will happen again, we don't end up having that problem again. And so I'm being ahead of that problem in terms of my own behavior. It's a very different style than saying, oh, that's AWS's fault, we just have to wait until it gets solved. Or that's AWS's fault. Yep, we band-aided it, but we don't have time to go actually figure out what the root cause is and get after it. So I give you tactical things that are tangential. You say, what does it have to do with this give first philosophy? I mean, they're tangential. They're examples, I think, that fit within this context, but have the same sort of way of being. Yeah. Non-transactional, positive sum, multi-term.
It's, there are many folks in IT, and by this point, 12 years in operating in, fundamentally an IT-based company, thousands of conversations, and some of them are not surface level. You develop relationships, you get deep with these folks. They've spent careers, in IT, and there's this pattern that I've seen. Many folks enter IT because of a variety of different things, and at the expense of almost sounding pop psychological. Humor me, Brad, for a second. Many are technically inclined. They like the silent isolation of exploration of technology. It's a great job where it's not sales where, you have to leverage this sometimes absent part of your character to go and face, other folks and in many ways be, who they're not. The technology is the draw. And before you know it, you're at you are literally, it's a service oriented job. That is the job of IT, making sure people can access stuff is like the fundamental principle, and it's often overlooked. So I'm interpreting, if all the things, the advice that you just gave and the tactical examples as, this is a mechanism for folks to even have not less an olive branch, because I don't want to set the wrong impression of a contentious relationship between IT and the employees of a company. It exists in certain ways, but they can come at this like giving first towards their employee base, as opposed to being the reactive, send me a ticket, I'll see what I can do. Those programs could be anything from, how to make employees successful. And it doesn't take much, you don't have to be a salesman and put on a face that you don't necessarily, authentically wear every day. But being excited about the technology that you're providing access to, is a really remarkable way to shift the whole narrative and the whole relationship, the way those connections are often understood between employees and IT professionals.
I think that's really well said. I think personalizing it even a layer deeper. My guess is many of the people here, are the IT person for their family.
Many,
right? They're IT person for their parents. I would say I went from feeling burdened and put upon when my mother would call me and tell me that she was wrestling with thing, where thing was something she had asked me about 9 other times, and I'd helped her 9 other times to solve thing. I shifted my mindset a long time ago, and it wasn't for my mother, it was actually for my wife, Amy. I gave Amy the present one on her birthday one year, amongst other things. I did give her nice other presents. But one of them was, I'm going to give you lifetime unconditional, joyful tech support. Uncomplaining.
Yeah.
So basically, I'm never going to whine. I'm never going to complain. I'm not going to be put out. I'm not going to say, I already told you how that works. I'm not going to, whatever. That's stupid. You shouldn't do that. I'm just going to smile and I'm going to solve the problem. And, it sounds trite, but the difference when somebody says, this isn't working for me, and you try to tell them why they're wrong and they're stupid, versus when somebody says, this isn't working for me, and even though you think to yourself, man, they just don't get it, carefully understanding what they don't get and carefully helping them understand what they need to do to solve the problem, or to be able to get back on track with what they're doing. Like the difference between those two, one time you might not notice it that much. The second time you might not notice it that much. The 5th time you interact with that person, you've rewired the interaction. And you've rewired the interaction where a cynical person might say, yeah, they're just going to take more advantage of you. They're just going to complain, and tell you, lean on you more. That's not been my experience. My experience is that they appreciate what you're doing more, because you're not putting them in a position that's a one-down position where they feel inferior to you. You have better knowledge than them. There's a problem in what they're trying to interact with that they can't solve. They can't solve themselves, and they need somebody else to help them. That's the frustration. The frustration isn't my thing isn't working. My frustration is I have to go to another person and ask this other person to help me solve my problem. And there's always an element of that, not for everyone, but for many people, which is, I wish I could solve this problem myself. You're giving them a gift when you solve it for them in a way where they actually feel enabled rather than put upon, where they feel like, they feel like you appreciate them even though you're solving their problem.
That's right.
Versus you're going out of your way and they feel like they're having to pull something out of you. And that fits very nicely with this philosophy. I mean, so many people I've interacted with, I'll take it away from IT for a sec. So many people I've interacted with over the years in life, hey, what can you do? What can I do for you, Brad? Thanks so much. That was so helpful. My response is, don't worry about it. Like, it's cool. And what ends up happening is that person goes away and they're like, I want to do something for that guy. And so when something comes up that they can do for me, they do whatever it is in their world. That's the essence of what I'm describing. You're not doing things, again, altruistically. You're not being selfless. You're not being self-sacrificing. You're not demeaning yourself. You're just doing it in a way that accrues benefit down the road in ways you don't see yet. And when it comes back to you, it's way more satisfying, and it's often way more significant. It
really is.
And what the individual trade would have been. Well, I'll do this for you if.
This has been my experience here in Boulder, and I want people to, basically leverage these thoughts, Brad, and bring this to their communities, where their community may be their house, could be their office, just starting in the most small atomic unit, just trying what that's like to give first, no questions asked. It's wonderful. And I think actually this is a phenomenal place to wrap up. Let me ask this. We're obviously going to, make sure our media staff will make sure people know where to access the Give First book. But what I would love to know is, like, what's the one takeaway? We've talked about a number of different nuggets along the way that, if anything, in a sentence, that you want people to walk away from, with this book. We've had practical examples, good elaborative thought on this. Just one quick thing.
I'll name something that came in a conversation with somebody else earlier today that I thought, when they said it, really landed with me. They made the statement, we're talking about a couple of different things, including their own view, their own approach to life, and some of the things that have been important to them against the backdrop of Give First. It wasn't an interview. It was just me and somebody that I was getting to know for the first time. They said, one of the things you're saying really lands with me around something that's really important. I think that life is so much more satisfying. They didn't say enjoyable. They didn't say successful. Satisfying. When you approach things with an abundance mindset instead of a scarcity mindset. Mm. I said that, I pressed on it. I said, yeah, I agree with that. Tell me more. I said, well, when people approach problems with a scarcity mindset, or confront situations with a scarcity mindset, or live their life with a scarcity mindset, the behavior, the starting point is very, very different than when you approach things with an abundance mindset. Now, you may have scarcity of resources, but with an abundance mindset.
Right.
The scarcity of mindset would be, oh, I don't have enough resources. It's so shitty. I can't get this thing done. I'm going to be fucking miserable. Blah, blah, blah. Like, that's the scarcity mindset. The abundance mindset is, okay, I only have these two things, but I'll figure out how to make my problem solved with these two things.
Yeah.
Such a different, like a very simple little switch. And in terms of leadership, management, and frankly, just getting stuff done, I think if you show up each day and say, wow, it's 2025, I have this amazing job, with all of these resources. Yes, sure, I don't have as many, Claude tokens as I'd like because, my company's only giving me $20 worth of Claude, whatever, right? But you have Claude tokens. Like, it's unbelievable what you can do versus what somebody could do 50 years ago.
Yeah.
So from that frame of reference in terms of the problem solving, and it makes everything move better.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Brad, listen, I'm fortunate enough I get to see you in person often. We're here in the same town, and, obviously your board work with us is mind-blowing. Thank you so much for doing this and taking your time today. And we're excited to get this word out on Give First. It's something that I've learned here that I practice every day. If, even my LinkedIn is mentor. It's my funnest thing, when I get that out.
You embody it so well. And, it's one of the things that I love about working with you, Raj, and Jump Club.
Amazing. Thank you, my friend. I will see you soon. I know we'll be with each other at an investor conference here pretty soon.
Yep.
And we appreciate you.